Welcome back to the I Try to Be Straight podcast with Susie.
And with Nate.
And you always mumble when I intro. If you guys are watching the video,
I mouth the word.
And you'll see
it's
Nate
really
mumble.
embarrassing.
It's really funny.
I don't know why I do that.
I don't know either, but it's so funny. We're so excited for today. But to kick it off, we are in the middle of Pride Month. So I just want to kick it off with a little question to Nate.
Oh my gosh.
Nate, what's been the highlight so far?
You can't just like throw questions at me.
I love doing it.
It's really, I get nervous. Well, we went to, it was a really loaded weekend because we had some Christians protesting Pride in our city. And so I haven't really participated in that much Pride, and I should have, but I was participating in this one this year, and sure enough, there's a giant conference in the middle of Sacramento kind of protesting Pride with a worship night with a like that Let Us Worship group. And I'm just like, this is really cool, because those are organizations I used to be involved with on some level. And so it's weird to see that coming in to this. But then I guess the good side.
So that was his favorite part. He actually went
part.
and worshiped.
I like tension and anger, so I felt good there. No, the next day, Sacramento Pride, we went and saw the parade together, and there were a ton of it was a pretty wholesome parade, honestly. It was super sweet, good mix of different groups, but there were a lot of Christian floats. Yeah. There were like several affirming gay Christian churches in Sacramento, and they all were walking together, and we knew some people in them. And it was really redemptive after seeing like all of the Christian anti-gay parade to see like a Christian pro-gay parade like walking through our city. So that was really special.
Oh, I love that. The next day after we went to the parade, I was sitting at a restaurant, and I could hear the people next to us talking about how they participated in the parade. And that was just like cool, because, you know, we're around so many Christians all the time. Maybe not so much anymore, but still to an extent. So it's just cool to see like the community expanding in a sense of like, oh, there's more people who are accepting and loving, and it's not like you're gonna go to hell, you know, like Sean. So yeah, that's cool.
It's a little hopeful.
It is hopeful. It's awesome.
I guess that's what it was, hope for me.
Yeah.
But without further ado, there's a really special guest here. I say special guest every time. I need a new word, new adjective. But I'm really excited about this guest because I used to listen to her music as a kid growing up. I would listen to only Christian music as a pastor's kid, and I would pull my sister's albums, and I listened to mainly girl singers, and I would kind of keep that low key. I wouldn't really talk about the girl singers I listened to. Like I listened to this band called Point of Grace. I listened to Rebecca St. James, and then I listened to this other incredible singer named Jennifer Knapp. And we are incredibly blessed to have Jennifer Knapp joining us today. She is a writer. She has won Dove Awards. She's a singer. She has written a book that I listened to the audiobook of this week, and so powerful. Welcome, Jennifer Knapp.
It's good to be here, you guys.
Thanks for being here.
It's really good to have you.
I'm already keen into your introduction, Nate, that you're a PK. And then the other is like listening to Christian chick singers on the DL, because it's so funny though, because that reminded me like back in the day when I was, you know, doing music in the CCM world, that so many like now I'm finding out all these guys that were listening to my music, and not just gay guys, like straight guys as well. Like they're everywhere. And but what you were kind of talking about, like, you know, kind of hedging your bets on like kind of not overly exposing yourself as listening to female artists. And it just shows that even inside of like Christian culture, the thing for like straight dudes to like be so afraid of whatever gender roles or identity you're supposed to be presenting as, that you don't want to listen to chick singers, you know, which is so ridiculous, you know, you know, like now, like I look at like my demographics, like you get like fun things like on Spotify and stuff like that show you, you know, where everybody's at and how old everybody is and what sex everybody is if they put that into their thing. And like I look at my music and it's like right down the middle, like half guys and half girls, which makes me so happy, because I don't want to just be writing for ladies, right? I'd like to think that I'm like able to communicate to as many people as possible, but it reminds me, it just gives me a bit of a giggle to know that all of these guys like 25, 30 years later are coming out of the closet as being Gen Knapp fans because there's not as much to risk anymore about being, a young dude. Either, like for you, probably, I don't want to assume that I know your story at all, but, if you're a gay guy and talking about listening to chick singers, then that, and you're in the church, you probably didn't want to tell people about that. But if you're a straight guy and didn't want to answer any questions, you didn't want to answer it either. So it's just kind of a nutty thing that happens inside of Christian culture, especially like conservative environments that I already hear picked up in what you're saying.
No, you're absolutely right. I was terrified to give any hints that I was gay, and I knew that I was different at that point. People were already teasing me. So I was like, they're not going to hear about these chick singers I'm listening to. No way. But I listened to them. I listened to your album on repeat, and I I stole my sister's whole CD. I wonder if she wondered where it went because I took it.
That's awesome.
It was fantastic. And then I guess, you're going to get into your story, but I guess a few years later, and I was still closeted, right, for a long time. But then hearing the way that everything happened in your story, it kind of I went through that journey too, because I was watching you and I was like in the closet watching you go through all this and all this, all the things people were saying. And I felt it too. So, your story I've kind of been following, and it, it's impacted me for a long time. The bravery you've shown and the courage. Just with that, I want to say thanks.
It's kind of funny. Well, I appreciate that. On one hand too, I recognize that, and kind of like the DL kind of space inside of CCM, even riffing off of that a little bit. Like when I first came out and I was coming to shows, there was a challenge for people to come to shows because, that would out them as an ally or maybe gay or otherwise, or if people were nervous. So that kind of, me being comfortable with coming out and doing shows and being visible in that way really kind of put the spotlight on some folks to kind of have to make a decision somewhere in there because of that guilt by association kind of thing that somewhat permeates Christian culture. But I think the thing that I had faith in, and that it took me a little while to, and even in living out that experience, the thing I had faith in is surely living in the dark is not really helpful for everybody, whether it was me, whether it was my experience or other people's experience. We just haven't heard inside of Christian culture of or hadn't seen very many representations, if any at all, of people who had been able to come out, navigate that, and still be positive and uplifting. And it wasn't as you hear in Christianese, one of the things that I always kind of I giggle at now, but you've lost yourself to the ways of sin. And I thought this is really a bizarre thing because that's not the experience. Coming out has been incredibly fruitful, very, very much part of the journey of my wholeness and my well-being, and including unhinging a part of my faith that I was ready to chuck the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because if I was really lost, I don't know, it was just coming out and being honest and just really getting to the point where I sensed that I had nothing to lose I had nothing to lose and I had everything to gain by coming out. And in that process of being able to do that, I think, now 15 years on from that, or almost 15 years coming on from that, I'm appreciating so many other churches, like you were talking about in the beginning, churches showing up at their Pride festivals. It's no longer just seeing churches participate in a protest or, exiling or actively marginalizing the LGBTQ community, because there are now so many of us here that are visible and out and doing it, that it actually starts showing that for the volatility that it is, right? That the negative and the kind of protest, it's not a protest. It's absolutely an awful vilification of a lot of people who are, otherwise participating in a community that wants to be together and celebrate our fullness together. And 15 years ago, we didn't see that. We didn't see churches hosting Pride events. We didn't see, we saw, that's not to say that there haven't been churches for decades that have had open and affirming communities, but we just haven't had enough visibility inside of that to really kind of permeate to to the places that are outside of the major metropolitan areas, right? The idea of a young kid somewhere in rural Tennessee or in the middle of, the valley in California that feels so far away from a San Francisco or an LA to feel like that might be an island. But yeah, it's pretty extraordinary to me that visibility has been, increasing more and more over the years to that. Well, now you're just, with it being Pride Month and everything like that, just that my absolute and utter joy that you just see without even skipping a beat, so many churches and faith communities involved in their local support of Pride and LGBTQ plus people.
Yeah, no, totally. We're going to get into your story. There's something that you said in there that rings true to me. And I think it rings true to Nate too. It's the vilification of queer people who've come out from the church. And I'm sure that being Dove Award winner, musician, songwriter, like you were in it. And so when you came out, what was that like to be almost othered and vilified as somebody who's like, quote unquote, fallen away or given into sin? Yeah.
I have to remember how gut churning that experience was. Like I didn't really, I knew that was where I was headed because I knew the alternative of playing. I knew what I didn't want, which is I didn't want to go out playing and for people to think that because I hadn't told people that I was hiding something. I just didn't want that. For some reason in the back of my mind, I just couldn't stomach the idea that people would be in any way thinking that I was hiding or trying to deceive anyone. But, that's not the way that I play. That's not the way that I perform. Yeah. I always wear my heart on my sleeve. So it was very difficult. But the thing I can say about it is that I'd been around Christianity long enough. And I think, especially if you've grown up in it, I knew what was going to be said. I'd seen and witnessed the behavior, and I'm like, I think there's a part of me is like, I knew that I was going to hear those things. It is something to know that those, the vilification or the harsh language and admonition when it's directed at you and specifically for, to your face, it doesn't get any easier in that way. But the good news I would say is that I didn't actually hear or experience anything that actually surprised me. So that was, it's ironic, right? Well, can you say something new? And now to the 15 years later, I kind of laugh when people drive by and put up, a social media post or every once in a while I get a weird letter or something. I know myself well enough and I've seen those enough that I actually have to remember how painful that is for other people. But and the other side of that is what I didn't expect, which I didn't expect that after I came out and almost immediately after I came out to meet the open and affirming people that I just thought, when you're in the middle of that dark space and that really challenging, scary space, right? Even though you hope that you will find friends inside of that space, even though that you hope that this is a good move against, if you had everybody telling you your whole life that this is the worst possible decision you could make for yourself, right? And you haven't yet tested it, it's a terrifying decision to make, to go, I have to do this, consequences be damned, right? It is... Your back's up against the wall going, my only future forward in wholeness and well-being and hope is to actually come out. When I did that, I did not expect how much positivity I received. I did not expect how many queer folk would become visible to me that I hadn't seen previously. And to the point where it's so ridiculously so many that I'm like, oh, I was such in my own bubble of fear and my own experience, right? Wow. And upset, with my own anxieties and my own stresses that I couldn't see it. But you also have to be there and you have to open yourself up to it. So the good news is, like I say, is that yes, the fear is there. And yes, you are opening yourself up to that. But also hope and the community and the support that is available to you that only comes by letting people know that you need help, that you need that support to, that visibility is to allow yourself to be seen. And I realize it's a really weird trade-off. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be good or safe for you to be around. And we should definitely maybe spend a second talking about that. But there was so much help and support and encouragement, including my complete privilege of having a very supportive family on both my wife and I's family sides. So I knew I was in a safe space to be able to handle that. I knew I could handle that. But I was super surprised to get through that. It wasn't as easy as I thought it might be. And also it was very surprising that the journey that I've been on so far and how positive and hopeful it's been.
What did God look like in your life during that time? Because I think I can sit in my body and think back to some moments in my life where it was just dark, and you think like, how am I going to get through this? How am I supposed to wake up tomorrow and do this again? And slowly but surely things get better, but I don't know. I think there's like things like community, like you said, some people might not have that. So like, where does spirituality, what do you do for somebody who's sitting and they don't know what to do?
I appreciate that. And I love that you asked, like, what did God look like to you then? And I don't think anybody's asked me that quite in that way. I would if I'm dead honest, God was zeroed out for me. I couldn't differentiate the hostility that I knew and had experienced by the people and the names and the faces that I could name in my, I couldn't distinguish God from church. Right? God from the people of the church. So I think I just kind of, put that off to the side and just zeroed God out. Like I didn't have ambivalent, I would think would be the best word that I had for it. Just at the same time, like I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I have things to say in and around religion, and have kind of renegotiated what I do inside of a religious space. But I'm also more comfortable now, for example, saying I'm really actually not inclined to be a religious person. I'm a person of faith, and Christianity is definitely the mother tongue and the language and the tradition that I participate in. But we could have hours and hours of conversation about what that means in terms of church. So kind of circling back around, it wasn't until I came out that I had to kind of really consider what, the thing I kind of always, you will hear me say this no matter where I go, is like, I definitely was willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But one of my favorite quotes is, when you do that, all you get is a wet, critically injured baby.
What?
Right?
I've never heard that quote.
That's so good.
It's kind of graphic.
It's from a movie. It's from a movie called For Your Consideration. It's one of my favorite movies. But
okay.
But I realized when I was doing that I was obviously what we mean when we say that is we're throwing everything out and consider it all waste. But I realized somewhere in that, as I kind of became more uncomfortable and understood myself, that I was throwing away a lot of things because when I was allowing other people to kind of determine that for me, I'm like, oh, here is this asshat over here who makes me feel terrible and obviously and unsafe, right? Obviously, I don't want to be around those kinds of people. I don't want to be around that environment. But did that really mean that I didn't have access to my own spiritual journey anymore? And that just, as the temperature kind of calmed down for me, after I was zeroed out God and went, no, I'm never going back and I'm not going to do that. And that's okay. I think there was a good season to be able to not make any decisions on that account. And when I decided whether or not I was going to participate, then I got myself into a space, and I wish I could say with any purpose or wisdom, it was just the way things panned out. But as I kind of got a lot more comfortable, I was like, oh, wait a second. That guy over there doesn't get to say where I get my hope from. That guy doesn't get to say, what my spiritual life is like and what my journey is. And that guy doesn't get to judge it either. And when I was ready to kind of engage and I was comfortable to just naturally do the things that were meaningful to me inside of my faith and inside of my spiritual space, then I went and did that. And that I was able to do that, I think, because I'd gotten over the concern about these external voices, these external stressors. And if that sounds like it took no time at all, that's not true. I mean, I quit contemporary Christian music in 2002, and it took me another 7 years to even pick up my guitar again.
Wow.
Because I was just so afraid of even picking up my guitar because I didn't want to play Christian music anymore. Just that decision alone was so difficult.
Yeah.
So and it took another, so I think it was like another 8 to 10 years before I was really in a space of saying, to even cracking the door to Christian community, even cracking the door. And then I went, I'm skipping way ahead. And then I think by 2017, I was going back to school. I was going to school and getting my master's in theology. So,
no way.
Right. So, I know that we talk about these things inside of a podcast, but I would say to anybody listening, it's like, seriously, give yourself time. Some people might turn that around in a year to, 6 months, a year, or a couple weeks. Some of us take longer than that, a decade or longer. The thing I fear about the time is to just how quickly we can get into a space of just giving ourselves grace. And so when I talk about that time span for me, that's the greatest gift I gave myself in that space was to just say, I will not let some external thing tell me that I should be a person that's ashamed of myself, that I should be a person that allows dangerous people to judge me, right? I mean, we kind of know, right? We know when somebody isn't making us feel good, isn't affirming us, and it doesn't matter on what grounds that is. If a person's harmful to you and a stress to your daily sense of self, that person's not a good person. Why the hell would you want to be around them? And if that's a church, why the hell would you want to be around that church? So it takes time to figure out where we're comfortable. Now I can go up to anybody most of the time and be around some pretty caustic people because I'm not worried about that battle anymore. But that took a long time to be able to do that, to be able to enter back into spaces that may not be kind to me. It doesn't, I know what my boundaries are and I know what my limits are. But I think it's really good for us to be able to take the time and figure out what that is and give ourselves the space to do it.
It's incredibly powerful. Honestly, you're dropping some crazy wisdom bombs, and I really appreciate it.
Sorry.
I should know this. No,
good.
We really need this. I think like I read your book, but I don't know if you mentioned, well, the book was before you got your master's degree. I didn't know you had the master's in theology. That's incredible. You are bringing so many different skills here today, and I really appreciate it. But what I want to say is so for someone in the closet that's dealing with this, you gave up everything. You faced this down to an extent where the whole Christian music world was watching you and was all gonna publicly reject you. I mean, we've had to go through our own rejections coming out, right? Like we have a lot of people that are mad at us, of course.
Sure.
And we're still dealing with it. But I would say this makes you a bit of a pro at choosing your path, even in the midst of rejection. Also choosing God after all of that. Like, how would you, what were the tools that made that possible? What got you to the place where you could face that down and still, be in a place where your heart was still okay?
This is, you're talking about one of the points that actually made me mad because the answer to that question really lies in the fact that I knew I was a person of worth, and I knew I had recovered my dignity in my life before, once I got to that space. But so in the book Facing the Music, right? So I wrote that book, and what people wanted and expected for me was to write this super gay journey about how it was so hard. And instead, what I did was kind of talked about my life. I wrote the memoir of my life, mostly to kind of show that I'd been through these experiences in other ways before. So by the time I came out, I feel like, when I look back, it's easier for me to say now, I feel like I was prepared for that moment in a lot of ways. And when I say that I had my dignity and my self-worth, what really got my goat was that I realized it was my experience through my faith, through my study and understanding of God's love for me, that I had arrived at that space, and even arrived at the courage to be willing to test the bounds of God's love. And that was terrifying. I mean, it's a terrifying thing to come to at any point in our lives, to be a Jonah, to go, screw you, God. I don't really want to do it. I see you. I hear you. You know, I see an opportunity for me, but I don't want to do that thing. I want to go this way. But that's all to say is somewhere in there, like, I knew where I was at, and I was able to be brutally honest with myself in my experience to go, this is where I'm at. I'm pretty gay, and I want to continue to be gay. And it's not, you know, like, this is just me. And if you don't like me and this is the truth, then I'm willing to, like, I don't want to hang out with you because you're a God that's no good for me. Seriously, the things that I said. But all that being said is, like, I was also willing to test that. Like, are you a God that's good for me? And so I found that out. I was willing to test that. I'm not sure I'd advocate for that necessarily in the, you know, the testing of relationships, like the screw you, you have to come with me kind of thing. But that's all to say is that I'd been through that experience before. And this was yet another thing that I could say, okay, my past experiences have been that when I'm trying to pursue the best possible outcome, not just like self-serving, but the best possible outcome for the human being that I feel like I've been given a vision to be able to live out. And that was something that I had developed inside of my faith tradition of Christianity. And like I said, that got my goat, but I wasn't willing to abandon that. And I didn't know how to abandon it. And I did it. And that's kind of how I went forward in that. So it is in that space that I even started to kind of reconsider my ambivalence toward faith community, considering how critical that was, from how critical faith was in me understanding and coming to a place where I was able to essentially, like, I was able to come out because I understood myself in the way that God did. And that is the thing that kind of blew my mind, because it reset the narrative of 1,000 other people who had told me differently growing up. And yet when I communed with myself, when I got into a sacred space and was living in, you know, I'll throw a Bible thing out there. The temple of the Holy Spirit is our hearts. If we are the ultimate sanctuary, when we meditate or sit and pray and commune with God in our aloneness, right? But only us, that is a sacred space. That is a sanctuary. And we have to know we have to know our own voice as well, and leave out the other voices that are out that, you know, and it'll be tested once we leave there. It will be tested once we leave there. But we have to know something in that space, and to be able to say, okay, I'm ready to leave this space now, and I'm safe enough to be able to go out into this next space, go out into the world, and go out and, you know, not just, you know, listen to the voice in our head, but be willing to test that. And that was something that I was willing to do at that time, and willing to be wrong even, you know. But it turns out, I think that was one of, you know, I think getting in touch with understanding that and my own self and my own boundaries was very critical. And if I hadn't had my faith to do that, I'm not sure where. I mean, I think I probably would have been okay, but I think I would have been faithless and probably pretty pissed off and angry. And and I'm just not angry anymore, you know. And I have a lot more. I have a lot more appreciation of faith and spiritual community, I think, that I didn't anticipate having, especially when I was ready to throw, like I said, chuck the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean, I was even going to say, with you saying that you're not an angry person, your heart is so soft, and your spirit and just your energy is so open and positive. But I wanted to go back to something you said, that you went from screw you, God, to I found myself in the way that God saw me. And so my question is, how does God see you? Like, what was he saying then?
I don't think anything new. I mean, part of it might be a little bit of like my difference in the way I might talk. Like, I'm not sure that I would sit here and say God sees me in this way. I'm not sure I see, like, theologically speaking, I'm not sure that I'm not super comfortable in speaking in God in anthropomorphic terms, like God is being and divinity is being to me, but not necessarily in a body. So it's easier in spirit or in energy in that kind of space. So for me, I guess maybe, and this is probably a weird answer to this question and way too esoteric, but I don't feel seen as much as I feel integrated. Like I'm not resisting that I am of spirit. Does that make sense? I'm not, I like on other sides of it, it's kind of a weird thing. And it translates even in a real world practicality as well. I mean, I love, like, I've been with my partner now for over 20 years.
Aww.
And I've been in that time, I have gone from love me, and needing to be loved and talking about those things. And even now to, and gone through wild seasons of jealousy and or fear and anxiety because that love was so meaningful to me that I was afraid to lose it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As I've matured over time, I say in air quotes, perhaps, like one of the things I'm learning in that relationship is to hold it with an open hand. Like I trust that I've been around and know that relationship well enough that I don't need to make a convincing argument or to do a dance or to be anything extraordinary to be seen by my partner. My partner knows and is there, and it doesn't mean that I don't take for granted or we don't have, things that we work on, but I'm not afraid of losing something that is. It is just the being of that relationship. It's the existence of it. So, I think so to kind of wrap that up a little bit, I'd just say the more that I've gone through any one of those critical crises or anxieties, to just kind of I've literally tried to let go. Like to stop trying to control it, stop trying to be anxious and seek out just a peace with it, which is actually way more Eastern probably than it is in terms of what we're taught with Christianity. We're taught so much to do, but be still and know that I am God. You don't have to do anything. Like just sit still and listen. Like let the anxieties calm down. Like just, and all that. Like I have anger, fears, all the things. And I just look at them going, well, what is that? Okay, I hear it, but just try and let it go. Let it pass through you. And, just try and understand that my state with God is not in question. It's not under threat. I'm not, God's not waiting to pounce to send me to hell. God is, if anything, that I felt like there's a revelation for us to know inside of Christianity is to know that we are free, to know that we are liberated. Like that is a victory over death. That is a victory over the darkness.
Preach it, preacher.
Wow.
That's so good.
Oh, yeah. And here
So
I go,
good.
right?
I know. What church do you preach at with your theology degree and your those word bombs you're dropping? We need to go to your church. If you're not a preacher, you need to be. I actually don't know, but they better let you guest speak at least some Sundays. I was gonna say, so it sounds like that. When you realized you were in love with a woman, and I've read your book, you were pretty honest with yourself that, this is real. And then you went on for that. Then you kind of, reconnect with God, figure that all out eventually. And then you ended up getting a theology degree. What inspired that? And how did that confirm your beliefs? And what was that like having already come out and then working on that? That's really interesting to me.
Well, one, I'm a nerd. If things
Nice.
don't kind
Love
of, if it doesn't make, I wouldn't still be here if I wasn't able to logically connect and connect with a sense of without an intellectual embarrassment is kind of like, if that makes any sense. That's fine. Somebody can think that I believe in fairies in the sky or something like that, but one of the things that kind of got me through even my frustrating years and I would say my ambivalent years, I enjoy that 10 years I spent reading people who, I read critiques of the Bible. I read people that I agreed with and I read people that I disagreed with. I read books from other writers in other countries. I read people, I read from other other denominations. Like I read across the board, and I was, because one of the things that like academically for me in terms of Christianity was intriguing to me is I was trying to make sense of my experience. Like, how is this Christian experience that I'm having, or this faith experience that I'm having, actually making significant changes for the positive and overwhelmingly life-changing liberation in my life? And why do I want to go nowhere near a church? I was trying to sort those things out and try to understand something. And I went like back to the Reformation. I'm reading history books and, all the things like critiques on scripture and where did it come from and trying to understand what the Bible is and what it is. So I nerded out.
Yeah.
That's all to say is like, that was really helpful to me to be able to academically understand my tradition in some way, that it wasn't just an emotional, ecstatic experience, that I understood something about the 2,000-year history. Or here's a fun little tidbit. If you ever feel like your community is small, it's because it is. There are over 34,000 different denominations of Christianity alone. And it's then that
crazy.
34,000, and that's growing. Like that number's old. Like that was a number that it's probably a decade old, and I haven't researched recently what that is, but it's growing like exponentially.
That's wild.
Every day. Right. And if you know anything about denominations, right? Or sometimes I say, which flavor of Christian are you? Like, where did you grow up and how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Sometimes the only thing that separates one church from another is one little thing on their list that's different than, and then it's like 20 different things in the different combinations, right? So it is really hard to say that Christianity is one thing. That was so helpful for me to understand, and was part of my recovery in being able to understand that my tradition can make sense to me, that I can still choose to participate in it, and that it can still be my mother tongue without feeling like I'm offending any massive allegiance, because we are largely mistaken if we think any one denomination has the keys to the kingdom. That is just, it is a silly and preposterous idea. And you just don't have to go very far to see that and to get support in that kind of way. And even with the contests that I have inside of, like for me, if we go to LGBTQ and Bible debates, right, over clobber verses, which is a very important and critical step inside of LGBTQ faith communities. For me, I never really went through the clobber verses. I didn't give a shit. And because it's not that I didn't see it, or it's not that I don't respect that these interpretations are out there. But for me, I understood the Bible differently, not as the word of God, like Paul wrote letters. These are letters or excerpts from throughout Christian history that show us, what I call it a sacred text. Maybe does it have weight in our tradition? I think it certainly does. It is like one of the oldest contexts we have. But I felt so terrified of this particular opinion that I had until I heard a Bishop Gene Robinson of the Episcopal Church. He's since retired, but he was one of the first out gay bishops in the United States. But he said, I don't believe that the word of God is done being written. In that we all have the capacity to add to the arsenal in the history of who we are as a people. Every time we write this story down, every Brian McLaren book, every page you write in your journal could be buried under a mound of dirt somewhere. 500 years from now, somebody says, "Hey, these words of Nate really give me an insight into something critical about our faith tradition." So it's not that there are individuals who are having this same experience and journey that weren't necessarily writing. Weren't really writing with this idea of canonization. I mean, I'm sure Paul seemed to have a bee in his bonnet, but I understood those kinds of things differently. And when you kind of open up that world to that possibility, like I wanted my faith tradition to be able to breathe, I guess is like a one way to kind of sum that up. And would it still be as meaningful in that space. And strangely enough, even though I've heard critiques over the years and certainly been vilified because of it, strangely enough, I feel like I have more involvement now, like more faith, weirdly, now, or openness to my tradition now than I had before. Because the cynicism that I have on any given day, I would just say I'm being cynical, rather than having that cynicism build up into something that I'm afraid to talk about or afraid to question. And that makes a real difference in the way that we walk. And I think it makes a difference in my openness to other people to even accept something that I might be cynical about, but genuinely has grounds for them. So, yeah. I don't know. I'm rambling on at this point, but
no, that's so good.
I love it.
Being educated about my tradition in a broader scope, it was really helpful. And also to understand that in terms of different contexts, regions, countries, and just to realize like people in different places have different experiences, and and so will you. You will have a different experience and something to add to our canon, I think. Each one of us has that capacity to add to our canon in that way, because our experiences are different and where we are situated is different. So to give a bit of credence to that space, I think is very important.
That's so good.
So good.
I do have a question. So how do you navigate being this faith-filled person and also being part of the LGBTQ community? Like, because those two communities, they just sometimes clash. So you're kind of in this tension space. And I wonder if you feel the tension or if it's just different for you.
Yeah, I felt the tension. I kind of don't care about the tension anymore. Awesome. I don't really have that anymore. I don't mean to sound like dismissive of it at all, because I've had it, but it's kind of that open-handedness. Then I don't know how to express enough that I don't say it doesn't bother me, because it just doesn't, it's not a concern that I carry, whether or not I'm offensive. Obviously I want to be kind and generous to regardless. I want to be a good human being, the same and consistent human being that I am to every human being that I meet, regardless of where they're from or what they're saying or how they act toward me. Right. Like that is just, that is who I've decided to be and who I enjoy being. Like maybe this is part of like my creativity and maybe like years of being a musician. Like not everybody's going to write like every song that I write. Yeah. And people get onto the internet and tell me how shit that song was that I happen to really like. You don't survive that at a certain point if you don't go, listen, I appreciate that not everybody's going to like this. I appreciate that not everyone is going to want to be my friend. I appreciate that not every church family is going to be a home for me. So I just kind of, I release myself from that idea that everybody has to love me or that everybody will complete me in some other way. If I am not complete by myself and an understanding, if any of us do not understand something of our wholeness and our capacity to be, I'll borrow from Henry Nouwen, it's a difference between being alone and having solitude. And it's a way of looking at our own space and understanding that we're not actually alone, but we have our solitude. We do have the world that is uniquely ours, and no one will be able to experience that. So the outside world, I've worked on over the years to not have as much influence in my mood or my temperament or my sense of self, but to be able to work on those things alone and in private. That way, when I go out, I can just gift that out wherever I can offer it. And if it's not accepted, then it's like wiping the dust off your feet, not taking it too deeply personally. That's on a good day. I look smooth when I do it. And, and on a bad day, I look like shit, So, but we're all just trying to get along. But I think that's the challenge of that, is thinking that, is not necessarily that those tension points are not things that hit my radar as much anymore after years of practice going. I do not enjoy the up and down mood that I get in, right, when I feel that tension. Oh, now I'm in a bad mood because there's tension outside of me. Like, no, I've been kind of working at trying to be be the same person I am regardless of the levels or, you know, however you measure the kind of the spectrum of the tensions that are around me.
Yeah, totally. I feel like sometimes I'm still caught in like the training of being a people pleaser. So like doing everything right, like the way that everybody wants it to be. And so that tension for me, I still find it to be, I don't know, that rejection, that's something I'm working on. And so I don't know, it's hard to kind of embrace your own voice, like you were saying, and mute out the echoes and the chorus of everybody. So yeah, no, that's really good.
I'm no therapist, although I've paid for a lot of it. But I mean, I think there's something like in my experience, and you know, I know that a lot of this is probably hedged on my personality, but I do think there's a lot to be able to recognize, like, oh, I am stressed, you know, and then ask ourselves, what is actually stressing me out?
Yeah.
Like, what am I actually afraid of? Because I'm afraid right now. And you know, it's not necessarily, that's for me, every time I've done that in my life, or when I recognize something big like that on the outside, I'm an introvert anyway, so it works well for me. I go back home, I get into my little cave and I go, what was that all about? I don't like that feeling at all. You know, what am I going to do in this space to, you know, sometimes I just acknowledging something scares me or that it's challenging or terrifying to me, you know, sometimes is enough. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to be around that person. So, you know, if it's another human being, and going, okay, well, next time around this person, then what do I want to do? What do I want to feel like? What do I want to choose in that environment when it's stressful? So that's just part of the process that I go through. And it's been incredibly helpful to me in my life. It doesn't mean it takes any of those things away, but it does at least say that I've spent some time going, oh, yep, here it comes again. And now this time it's not, you know, I'm not just going to be pushed along with the tide. Like, I am now going to be able to make some autonomous choices, which I think is, you know, particularly as a woman inside a faith community who had often relinquished that, right? We're often kind of taught to get along and just smile and nod your head and not say no. Yeah. But now, like, it's pretty easy for me. If like I don't want to do something and I feel like my boundaries are being crossed in some particular way, I'm pretty good at being able to say, yeah, I don't want to be in this situation anymore. Pardon me, but I think I'm going to, you know, at least remove myself. But that takes a lot of work. I mean, like I said, I'm talking about it's super easy, but yeah, I'm 50 years old. So, I mean, I've been working on some of these things for well over 30 years, and some of them I'm still pretty shit at, but I have a plan.
No, I think you're doing pretty damn good. I'm going to be honest.
Honestly.
I think personally, it's been a struggle. Just to be candid, the last few months, it's been a lot of trying to defend my position while also trying to be vulnerable and expose my journey and my, like, with people close to me. And obviously we're doing this online. And it can be really hard to have these conversations with people and try and find the balance between, and I guess this is a question in general, because a lot of people I talk to online ask this too. So there's so many of us in this boat, but trying to be real and honest and walk with people that know us through these conversations of, this is what's happened to me. This is why I feel this way. You want to give them the olive branch of, this is my experience. I don't need you to believe me, but I need you to hear my experience, to then going straight to debating and like eventually destroying your soul because you're so personally invested because you want people to hear you and understand you, but you can't get them to. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. It's like you're debating with a wall, and not even debating. You're just trying to share. And I've had a pretty rough go lately. What advice would you give for those in that situation? Sorry.
No, I completely empathize with that. I mean, I used to feel so bad because I'm so crap at debating. Like, especially like when I first came out, like, maybe stop me if this sounds familiar. Like, how do you justify being gay? And, you know, how do you justify being gay and keeping your faith, right? How do you justify coming out and anything that you've read in the Bible and all these kinds of things that get into the debate territory? And like I said, I was crap at debate, and I'm a terrible biblical scholar and for a theologian, but Yeah. So part of me, and I'm just kind of not interested in it. I mean, I've never really had a good answer. Like, justify. What do you mean justify? I'm right here.
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you? Can you be gay and Christian? You know, like one of like my favorite useless questions is like, can you be gay and Christian? Well, yeah. Look around. Like, there are a lot of gay Christians. Like, that's happening. Like, you can be a lot of things and Christian. Like. Make a list. Like, I'm just one of the things that's on that. So that's all to say is that, I mean, I appreciate the urge, and I think that space is important. But the idea of justification or debate doesn't actually play out very well in real life. Like, socially, I don't debate with somebody who loves me. I just don't. Like, I don't debate someone into loving me. It's never worked. Please love me, like a convincing act. My desperation for any individual, and I could name a good handful of them in my lifetime that I've tried to convince to be loving me because I wanted their love. Some of it worked out and some of it didn't, but the debate never made that happen. What was common about the people who have truly been extraordinary human beings in my life is that they have asked me what my experience has been. They haven't asked me to justify myself. They haven't asked me for a debate. They have been people who have been open to hearing my story, open to hearing my experience. And sometimes there's disagreements inside of those spaces. Sometimes I'm not understood inside of those spaces, but I've had collaborators in that sense. I'm not somebody trying to not the pressure being put on me by any one individual to make a compelling argument for why they should think that I'm worth their time and their energy. And it's inside of the church community. When I move it to that space, when I move it to that idea, like, shame on our church if we've ever thought that it's a holy thing to expect somebody to prove themselves to us. If Christ died while we were yet sinners, that's it. I mean, there's no debate. There's no justification. Jesus just stood there. Jesus didn't justify the woman at the well. Jesus just turned to everybody else and said, stop doing that. Stop throwing stones. So I kind of, again, it's kind of an open-handed response. I think some people have been very good in that academic environment. I don't want to take anything away from it. I think some people, some personality types will make very good and compelling academic and debate-like arguments inside of the space. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to do it. You don't have to do it if that's not your call. The biggest protest that you can put up inside of that space is to be you. To stand in that space that is uniquely and wholly yours, and you do not have to apologize for you being you. We apologize for things that we do wrong. We apologize for, and we make reparations for things that we can fix, but being gay is not one of them. It is nothing that you ever have to apologize for.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just not. I don't know how much more plain to put it. To live your life will be the greatest understanding. And I'll say one more thing. I think the idea of debate also puts the pressure on this idea that we'll be able to make a convincing argument that pushes a button or turns something overnight. The experience of people who don't understand us or come to love or understand is a long story. You becoming you is a long story. None of us are done being us until we're dead. It is a long journey. And so too will the people who walk with us in it. Stop expecting an overnight or perfect answer or right answer or wrong answer. The best thing that you can do is be you, do the work, and surround yourself by those people who are in fellowship and communion with you who actually support that work. That will mean losses along the way. There are horrible people out there. There are losses that we will experience, but it's not necessarily, I mean, I feel like I've had those, I feel like it's safe to say that I've had those losses in my life, that some of them are LGBTQ related, but others are related to other things. I mean, I've lost members of my family, I've been lucky. I've not actually lost any intimate friends because of my sexual orientation. It's weird. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but like my parents, my family my family have been great. They don't understand it and they say weird things every once in a while. But I know that even how weird they are or uncomfortable they may or may not be, I know that they love me. And that's just the end of it. That's not always the case with some of our families. I realize that there are a lot of spaces out there, but it's very hard to say. I realize it's an easier thing said than done, but you do not have to apologize for being you. And sometimes the answer is, I do not know how to explain this to you, but today I just need you to believe in me. And I'm asking you to be a person who's with me, even if you don't understand me. And that, outside of that, where, I just consider like that's the really scary space of mercy. That's sorely needed and required at certain points in our lives.
Holy
really
crap.
good.
That's so good.
Yeah, I think it can feel like you're trying to convince them to accept you in a way, like you're trying to convince them that you're okay and that you just accepted this part of yourself fully, and you're hoping they accept it too. And I'm talking to my therapist, obviously, so I'm all right. But like,
do you feel like you have to read, like if there's a comment like in a social media spot, like on a Facebook page or something, do you feel like you have an obligation to read that comment that's written to you?
We've argued about this before. I don't necessarily, but I started a really big like hornet's nest last month with like 5,000 negative comments. That's not an exaggeration.
Job.
It was
Thank
insane.
You. I know. Thanks. Proud here. So I commented to a few. It's just hard because we have young people watching as well, and I don't want them to see all these things and just like feel all that weight and heaviness. Like, it just gets pretty dark. And I'm like, someone needs to defend so they don't feel like we don't have an answer. It's really, it's murky crap we're in here,
Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I don't get too much of that coming. Like I get the weird swing by on my social media pages every once in a while, but basically, in my zone, in those environments, and I totally appreciate, like, I don't want anyone to have to read that either. But the idea, one of the tactics that I took inside of that space is I'm going to actually model the response for when that happens, right? So when somebody comes by and does something particularly ugly, I will go, okay, as long as the rhetoric, it's not personally attacking, like I've had some people like, this is what the scripture says and this is why I believe that. And that I won't necessarily delete. I'll go, okay, well, that's okay. But also that's not, as long as you're not being unkind to other human beings, then I will allow the post to stay up. But then I usually respond to it saying, well, I appreciate that, but that's not working for me. Or I'm in one way or another, I tend to model that I'm not distressed by seeing the evidence of that. But I would also say, like, I guess one of the reasons why I ask is I think sometimes we feel, especially in this social media world, if somebody posts something to us or our phone rings or we get a text, like we're supposed to answer it, right? We're trained to kind of look at it and read it. And I don't know that I necessarily personally agree with that. I mean, if somebody sends me a letter and I look at it and I'm going, oh, this isn't a letter that's going to be any good for me to read one way or another. I'm not going to respond to it. Why am I going to read it? Why am I going to put something into my eyes and my time that I know what this says? I've dealt with what this is, I don't need to do that. So but I'm the same way with positive press too. Like I could get 5,000 positive comments. I don't read 5,000 positive comments. I get the gist of what's happening and I see the movement of it and then I respond as much as I can. But I don't feel like I tend to tell myself in a modern media world that I don't have to pick up the phone every time it rings. I don't have to immediately respond to the text in the instantaneous kind of thing. And sometimes some things, if they're sitting with me and I want to respond to them later, I do. But 5,000 is a lot. I mean, that's a deluge. But maybe sometimes like the other way to deal with that is like a one post to all of them or those kinds of things. But I tend to try and model the behavior that I will hope is most beneficial for those who might be like, I kind of look at it like, here's the other way to say it. I look at that as like, I set myself up in that space, in that public space to be able to take that hit. And what I want people in those spaces to understand is I'm capable of seeing that hit and that's directed toward me and I'll take it. But they don't get to do that to other people. And
Yes.
That's why I'm here. And I make that pretty much clear.
Yeah. We've like talked about it extensively because Nate is so strong. This guy will take hits all day long. And I'm kind of more of the like, okay, but like you're tired too. And like some of them are death threats. Like this is not healthy for anybody to read. And I kind of tend to lean towards like knowing our audience. Some of them are afraid to come out. Some of them have family who are not supportive, and they do feel like they have to put up that debate and that fight. And so I'm sitting here reading the comments and I'm like, this is not good. Like the algorithm is attracting more hateful people than positive people sometimes.
For that comment or that post.
Yeah. But how would you deal with somebody kind of who, let's say like they are a parent, you are a college student, some 20-something-year-old dealing with a parent who is not supportive, loving, kind, gentle in the ways that you might need them to be?
Yeah. I don't personally have a lot of experience in that space. So one of the things I would say is like definitely get around those who have experience inside of that space. I think PFLAG's a real one of the organizations that I know that are in and around high schools a lot, and middle schools and colleges as well, because PFLAG's dealing with parents. So getting other parents who've been affirming of their LGBTQ kids and that experience is definitely a handy thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other side of that is, I mean, unsafe people are unsafe people, period. I mean, so. Yeah. I think there's a lot that's said inside of LGBTQ spaces about coming out. And this is, I'd kind of mentioned earlier, hey, let's circle back around to this. What I would say is that safety is a very important thing. That's what I would advocate the most. And not everybody's going to be a safe person to come out to. You don't owe anybody anything to tell them about what you don't owe anything to anybody except for yourself. Like, to understand something about your sexual orientation is a private thing to a certain degree, like in terms of like who we might or might not be attracted to. And this doesn't really kind of take in our gender identity inside of that space. But yeah, being around those, like being able to identify the people who are safe for you and being understanding of, like LGBT, I'm aware that LGBTQ homelessness among youth is its highest largely because of, like tell me there's a kid that's moved out of their home that's a homeless queer kid. The numbers are astoundingly high about how much Christianity plays in that, because parents think that it's a good and holy corrective thing to kick their kids out of the house. I think any parent, regardless of anything, kicking their kid out on the street or making it a hostile environment already has a lot of problems going on with it. That's not a safe environment necessarily to, I would lower the expectations of understanding what a safe environment is. So how one survives that, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, don't come, you're going to have to stay in the closet while you live at home or whatever, but you're going to have to come up with a plan and get some very good, reasonable and safe advice in and around you from, not just from peers, but from adults, somebody wise that you trust inside of that space. It could be a therapist, an LGBTQ plus specialized therapist, in that kind of vein. There are organizations that can help you get through that and give you some resources that are actually really important, because it's not just a whim. Like some environments will be so dangerous for you depending on where you are in yourself in your life, that as much strategy as you can take and as much deliberate steps that you can take to be able to navigate that, I would strongly encourage. Yeah.
I think, and we're getting close to the close. I know we've taken a lot of your time, so we'll probably end pretty soon. Do you have any more? I had one more question, if that's all right.
Oh, sure. Go for it.
And if there's any questions or anything you want to say, obviously you are the guest, so you can pull a Hail Mary and say anything you want. So if there's anything you want to say, now's your chance. No? You good?
I think I've said so much. It's all good.
Wow. Well, I mean, but it's been like just truth bombs for days. I didn't know how there's so much density of good things in this episode. I'm really excited to put this out. But what I just want to say, jumping off that question, and just closing out, like, to anyone who is in the closet and is afraid, or to anyone that's like afraid to lose their faith or afraid to tell their parents, anyone that's in a really dark place, what would you say to them right now if you could talk to them?
The simplest thing I would say is that you don't have to be a Christian today. And you can be a Christian today. You can, it's okay to be either or. And you can be out and you don't have to be out. The combination of those things are really fairly simple to take all the pressure off and say, listen, just you are you, and it is okay with where you are. To be able to acknowledge where you are and hold yourself with a open hand and your faith with an open hand. It's okay. It's okay to be able to do that. It will take time, and you never know. Just, I would say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we like you, baby.
Jennifer, you are awesome. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? All the things, all the socials.
Yeah, the easiest way is, just add the .com. So jenniferknapp.com is the one-stop shop for all the things. So whether I'm on tour, I also do Patreon once a month, or I do Patreon as well. So I have an online show once a month. I do an online kind of theology, spiritual thing once a month. We have hangouts and stuff inside of that.
Wait, what?
So that's kind of cool. And yeah, but go to jenniferknapp.com and you'll see all the things that I'm up to.
Awesome. We might be on there.
Yeah, we're going to jump in there.
Yeah. Susie's like, heck yeah.
Heck yeah.
Also, Kansas, you re-released the 25th, you re-recorded it, right? For its 25th anniversary?
That's right. My very first Christian record I released in 1998. All you young whippersnappers out there. We were around the 25-year anniversary of it. So I decided to re-record it and re-release the record, which is really fun. It was, and I think in terms of an LGBTQ context as well, it was really it was a really meaningful experience to be able to go record that, kind of reclaim that space. Because I think one of the things that did happen inside of CCM is trying this revisionist history, right? Like, oh, Jennifer's gay, so this album doesn't matter anymore, from the people who are afraid of that. And for me to go out and release it and say, I'm not embarrassed about my faith experience. I'm not, this is just really good music, and this is a soundtrack of a lot of our lives. So it was something I did as a gift. And you just go on. All you have to do is go on like all the comments, see all the comments that are happening online, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or whatever. It's been a really meaningful experience to watch people that have either moved on, like we've been saying, like some people have moved on from their Christian cultural experience, and other people have moved deeper in. But a lot of people inside of that space are just genuine. They know where they are at, and that's what I love about them. There's no question, there's no debate, there's none of, there's no insecurity inside of those space. I'm just watching people grow into the fullness of who they are and who they know themselves to be. And it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to witness. And I feel like Kansas 25 is part of that.
Hell yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, well, congratulations. Listen to the album, guys. It's on Spotify and Apple Music and other places too. Buy maybe on vinyl. Get the vinyl if there's available.
Oh, you better hurry. We've got a couple left. All
right, limited edition vinyl. Okay, there you go. See, get going. And then also her audiobook is on Spotify. She reads it herself. I would highly recommend it. Really interesting story. You had me really hooked, because your life is just fascinating. We didn't have time to go on the podcast, so I'm kind of glad we just focused on all your truth bombs. But if you want to hear the rest of your story, this is more fun. Awesome. I know. You told your story so many times, on so many whatever. So we get to have the fun one, and then you guys can read the audiobook or listen to the audiobook.
It's worth it,
because it's really good.
It's so good.
But yes, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you, Nate and Susie. Thank you for having me.
Please come back.
Tomorrow?
All you have to do is ask.
In a month. We'll ask you in a month, so it's not weird. We'll ask you a month. That's chill. That's cool.
If you two show up at my doorstep, that will be a little weird.
Well, Zoom does have location tracking, so
oh my God.
No, it doesn't. That's so weird. I feel so awkward. No, I don't. I say more awkward things than that. Let's be honest. That's not the worst thing I said.
keep letting you talk. keep talking.
I dig holes.
Our producer's
with
looking
my
at
words
his face
often, so much. But yeah, well, I guess that's it for this episode.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next week on the I Tried to Be Straight podcast. We're so weird.
Okay.
All right. See you guys next week.
Bye.